I'm here with Alexander Neef, the artistic director of the Canadian Opera Company. I'm standing on the set with you of Semele, an opera by Handel. Although tell me a little bit about the kind of cross-cultural element of your production.
Well, we've entrusted the production to an artist from China, Zhang Wan, and when he took on that story, he actually found that there's a lot of connections between the myth of Semele and stories that come from his Chinese cultural background. So he really was exploring the universal nature of myth and added to that story that's essentially an old Greek myth. He said, this is something that I could tell from my Chinese perspective, as well as if we just did it straightforward, Western European mythology. And it's very interesting.
Do you feel as the overseer of the Canadian Opera Company's artistic direction and musical direction, has the influence of the Chinese temple, which is kind of very much at the forefront of the at least of the production elements of this show, has that kind of pulled you in one direction or another, perhaps in a different way that you might expect to approach a piece by Handel?
It's a good question. Like, what I feel about Handel as an opera composer is that he's really, with the exception of Monteverdi, I would say that Handel is the first great psychologist in opera, like Mozart and Verdi after him. Like somebody who forms complete characters, not just one-dimensional cartoon characters. Mm-hmm. And that means for me that it adds a certain universality to the stories that he tells and to the characters he displays. So it kind of invites you to go beyond a narrow frame of reference and try to make these stories a little bit more universal. Mm-hmm. And putting it under the roof of a Chinese temple, which is of course a symbol for the palace that Jupiter builds for Semele. Like essentially we're putting the story under a great mythological roof. Mm-hmm. That's the way I look at it. And it's kind of just some added value to the story because the temple that we use is an original temple from the Ming Dynasty. It's 450 years old, so it's not a set. It's an artifact that comes with its own history that could stand on its own.
It was mentioned earlier today that the temple does in fact have a very contemporary history as well that almost parallels the story of Semele. Can you tell me a little bit about the diary and what that entails?
Well, when Zhang Wan, the artist, found the temple in the Chinese countryside, it was actually a house. It had been transformed into a house that people were living in. And then he bought it and he excavated it and he found a diary of a man who had been suffering from his wife's infidelity and who murdered one of his wife's lovers out of jealousy. And he was convicted to death in exchange for that murder. And you can see that there's a lot of similarities to the story of Semele. Like all the elements of adultery, betrayal, love, jealousy, murder. It kind of, and that it struck him when he got in touch, and that was something that happened completely independently from him taking on the opera. Mm-hmm. But when he was asked to have a look at the opera, he said, wait a second, I have a story that actually relates to the story of Semele. And maybe when we talk about the universality of myth and the universality of Handel's operas, I think that's exactly what's happening here.
The opera is still very much considered a European, or at least a European-dominated art form. Do you feel that in a metropolis such as Toronto, which does have a very strong Asian and Chinese community, that such a kind of a cross-cultural production will invite a new demographic, a new audience to participate?
Sorry to interrupt, but just about one more minute, and then
sure.
I need to move Alexander.
We'll just finish that question.
Yep, this is it. Anyway.
Just wanted to give you that.
It's an interesting question. I think opera has for long been more than a Western European art form. Like it's over the past, at least 100 years, it's spread out all over the world. Like this opera is very big in China, it's very big in Japan, it's very big in North America, which is not necessarily a Western European influenced culture anymore. And again, I think it speaks to the universality of the art form, even though it originates from somewhere. I think what we've seen over the past 100 years that it translates very well into different cultural backgrounds. And we might just make a point with this production But it's not a development that we start. I think it's a development that's been going on for a long time. So this is maybe rather a confirmation of the fact.
Glad to hear it. Well, thank you so much for your time.